Ready to boost your cybersecurity knowledge and skills? Let's get started with Microsoft Security Essentials. In this course, you will learn the fundamental concepts of security, identity, governance, risk, compliance, and privacy. Then we will cover the capabilities of Microsoft security solutions, including Microsoft Entra, Defender XDR, Defender for Cloud, Sentinel, Intune, Purview, Priva, and Azure Security Services. And lastly, we will discover the AI-powered protection provided by Microsoft Security Copilot. I'm Brian Lee, and I worked in IT and cybersecurity for many years. I'm a Microsoft certified cybersecurity architect expert. Join me and learn Microsoft Security Essentials and explore key concepts, solutions, and AI-powered protection. Let's take a quick overview of Microsoft security solutions and their key capabilities. Security is a broad field. To meet the business needs of today's organizations, we should expand this umbrella term into multiple areas, including security, identity, governance, risk, compliance, and privacy. To help organizations better manage these areas, the industry has introduced various solutions, such as Identity and Access Management, or IAM, Threat Protection, Cloud Security, Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, or CNAPP, Endpoint Management and Security, Security Information and Event Management, or SIEM, and Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response, or SOAR. Risk and Compliance Management, Data Governance and Security, Privacy Protection, and AI-powered protection. In this course, we will look into key Microsoft security solutions in each of these categories, such as Microsoft Entra for Identity and Access Management, Microsoft Defender XDR for threat protection, Azure Security Services for cloud security, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, Microsoft Intune for endpoint management and security, Microsoft Sentinel for SIEM and SOAR, Microsoft Purview for risk and compliance management, Microsoft Purview for data governance and security, Microsoft Priva for privacy protection, and Microsoft Security Copilot for AI-powered protection. As you can see, Microsoft offers end-to-end AI-powered security products. Through this course, you'll have the opportunity to learn essential security concepts and solutions. What is information security really about? We can find the answer by understanding the fundamental principles of security. One of the most important security principles is called the CIA Triad. CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These represent the three key security concerns. Confidentiality is about controlling read permissions. For example, your social insurance number is confidential, and you don't want others to know it without your consent. Integrity is about controlling change permissions. For example, if you transfer $100 to someone, you don't want anyone to change it to $50 without your approval. Availability is about ensuring access privileges. For example, when you log into your online banking account, you don't want to get an error message saying the service is down. What do you get when you achieve all three objectives, confidentiality, integrity, and availability? You get security. The CIA Triad is the foundation of security. So if someone asks you, have you worked in security? If you have done anything to protect confidentiality, integrity, or availability, then yes, you have done a security job. In fact, security is such a broad field that you can add the word security after almost anything. For example, network security, system security, data security, application security, cloud security, IoT security, blockchain security, or AI security. The same security principles apply to all these areas. In other words, when it comes to security in these domains, our goal is to protect network confidentiality, integrity, and availability, system confidentiality, integrity, and availability, data confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and so on. Now you get the idea. You probably hear the term security threats very often, but what does it really mean? Simply put, threats in cybersecurity are potential dangers that can compromise your assets. The typical assets in an organization include devices, for example, laptops, workstations, servers, virtual machines, and mobile phones. Networks for connecting internal and external resources, such as internet, Wi-Fi, local networks, and cloud networks. Applications, for example, operating systems like Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iOS, and Android. Or business applications like Microsoft 365, corporate websites, and customer relationship management (CRM) software. Data, for example, database records, source code, files, pictures, and videos. All these assets have their vulnerabilities. Vulnerability is an important concept in security. It refers to the weaknesses that exist in your assets. For example, a device like a laptop might not be protected by the latest antivirus software. A Wi-Fi network might still use an outdated standard. A web application might contain insecure code, and a database might lack proper access control. So what happens if these vulnerabilities are exposed? Security threats can exploit these vulnerabilities to compromise your systems, steal data, or take down services. There are many types of security threats. Some common ones include malware, malicious software such as computer viruses, worms, trojans, spyware, and botnets. Ransomware is a special type of malware. Hackers can use it to encrypt data and lock systems, then demand victims pay money or ransom to restore their data and services. Phishing. Hackers send crafted emails to trick people into clicking links or opening attachments. Phishing is a popular method for stealing confidential information. Social engineering. Hackers exploit human traits like trust, fear, and curiosity to manipulate people into disclosing confidential information or performing harmful actions. Identity theft. Hackers use compromised identities and account information to steal money or breach system and data. Denial of service. Attackers try to bring down networks and applications, preventing companies from running operations and serving customers. SQL injection. Hackers inject harmful SQL commands into web application inputs to control database operations. Insider threat. It refers to compromises caused by internal people, such as employees, contractors, or suppliers. Today's organizations are operating in complex environments. requiring them to integrate three key functions: governance, risk, and compliance, or GRC, to enhance business efficiency, protect against threats, and comply with regulatory requirements. Now let's look into each component of GRC. Governance is for directing and controlling an organization's activities. It usually requires the company to define corporate strategies, create rules such as policies, standards, guidelines, and procedures, monitor the effectiveness of these rules, and establish a healthy culture to promote shared values and ethical behaviors. Risk management is about reducing the impact and likelihood of potential threats. The process typically includes the key steps, such as identify risks within your defined environments, analyze and prioritize the discovered risks, control the risks by taking suitable response actions, and track the risks through continuous monitoring and review. Compliance is to ensure an organization follows laws made by relevant governments and regulations created by government agencies or regulatory bodies. To do that, an organization needs to implement effective controls and take proper actions. Traditionally, organizations have managed governance, risk, and compliance separately. Now, with growing demands to coordinate across various domains, it's essential to integrate them into a unified GRC approach. How can we build a solid foundation for GRC? Technology alone is not enough. We need to have people, technology, and processes work together. Now let's bring all these elements together. Here's a diagram from Microsoft that illustrates a framework for managing GRC. It combines governance, risk, and compliance with their key activities like strategies, policies, controls, and laws. Also, it highlights that a successful GRC program is supported by three essential components: people, technology, and processes. The shared responsibility model is an important concept in cloud computing and security. In the past, organizations ran all their systems and applications on premises, so they were 100% responsible for everything. However, with the wide adoption of the cloud, many corporate workloads have moved to the cloud, like Microsoft Azure. Now the question is, who is responsible for doing which security tasks? For example, when it comes to installing a security patch for an operating system like Windows or Linux, is this the responsibility of the customer or the cloud provider? The answer is, it depends. It depends on the type of cloud service the organization is using. There are three common cloud service types. IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service. It requires the customer to manage most workloads, except for the physical components in the cloud, like computers, networks, and data centers. For example, you created a virtual machine in Azure. That's Infrastructure as a Service. PaaS, Platform as a Service. In this model, the customer focuses on applications, while the cloud provider manages the underlying operating systems and infrastructure. For example, Azure App Service is a managed platform for developing web applications. And SaaS, Software as a Service. This model requires the least management from the customer. For example, Microsoft 365 is a SaaS product. The customer subscribes to its services and uses apps like Word, Excel, and Teams. They don't need to worry about software development, the operating system, and underlying infrastructure. Here's a diagram from Microsoft that illustrates the shared responsibility model across different cloud service types. As you can see, for on-premises hosting, the customer is responsible for everything. When moving from IaaS to PaaS and then to SaaS, the customer's responsibilities decrease, while the cloud provider like Microsoft handles more tasks. The key difference between PaaS and IaaS is who manages the operating system. If the cloud provider handles it, then it's PaaS. If the customer does it, then it's IaaS. The distinction between SaaS and PaaS is who manages applications. If the cloud provider handles it, then it's SaaS. If the customer does it, then it's PaaS. Also remember, regardless of the cloud service type, some responsibilities always stay with the customer, including information and data, endpoint devices like laptops and mobile phones, and accounts and identities used to access resources. Defense in depth has been a classic security strategy for a long time, and it continues to play an important role in designing effective cybersecurity controls. Defense in depth is a term borrowed from the military. Imagine protecting a city center or an airport. You would set up multiple lines of defense. Even if attackers break through some of these lines, they still won't reach the final target. In information security, we apply this strategy by first identifying our most valuable assets, such as web servers and business databases, often known as our crown jewels. We then deploy multiple layers of security around these critical assets, like the layers of an onion. This layered defense approach makes it harder and more costly for hackers, so they might give up halfway. What are some security layers we can use? We often start with physical security. For example, only allowing authorized administrators to access server rooms. Identity and access management, such as enabling multi-factor authentication and applying role-based access control for cloud resources. Perimeter security, for example, using a VPN gateway or Azure Distributed Denial of Service DDoS protection to filter the traffic to our business network. Network security, such as segmenting virtual networks with subnets and network security groups. Compute layer security, for example, installing anti-malware software and closing unnecessary service ports. Application layer security, such as applying security patches and updates to mitigate application vulnerabilities. And data layer security, for example, encrypting files and database records, performing data backups, and implementing data loss prevention solutions. Please note that defense in depth doesn't mean simply adding numerous security controls. Instead, it involves strategically designing these controls using different technologies and expertise, such as identity and access management, network segmentation, application security, and data governance. So for hackers to breach all these layers, they must possess a broad range of knowledge and skills. As the cost and complexity of their efforts increase significantly, they are unlikely to continue their attacks. Zero Trust model has been widely adopted in the security industry today. To better understand Zero Trust, we first need to look at the traditional security approach. It simply divides an organization's environment into two parts: the external environment and the corporate network. The perimeter between these two is typically a network control device like a firewall. From a security standpoint, anything in the external environment is untrusted, while anything within the corporate network, such as users, computers, and applications, is trusted. This network-centered security model is no longer suitable for today's complex environments. With the migration to the cloud, the perimeter of the corporate network has shifted from network-based to identity-based. Firewalls and office buildings alone are now insufficient to protect our assets. Also, hacking tactics and techniques continuously evolve. Even within a corporate network, hackers may still use compromised accounts or devices to launch attacks. That's why the zero-trust security model is becoming popular today. Zero trust starts with a core philosophy or mindset. Trust no one, verify everything. In other words, nothing is trusted by default, regardless of its location. Verification is required before granting any access. The zero trust philosophy is implemented through 3 guiding principles. Verify explicitly. It requires always performing authentication and authorization using the available data provided by various sources, like accounts, locations, devices, and services. Use least privilege access. It means minimizing the user access scope, permissions, and duration based on needs. And assume breach. A breach could happen in any environment, so we need to proactively implement defense solutions like network segmentation, data encryption, and threat detection. To enable zero trust, we need support from 6 foundational pillars, including identities associated with users, devices, and services. We need to verify identities using strong authentication and assign the least privilege for accessing resources. Devices should be controlled to meet the security and compliance requirements. Applications should be managed for access, security, and performance. Data should be governed and secured using methods like data classification, encryption, and lifecycle management. Infrastructure should be configured, secured, and monitored throughout the organization's environment, whether on-premises or in the cloud. And networks should be segmented and protected. Now let's put everything together. Zero Trust is not a security product. It's a comprehensive model or framework for managing security. It starts with a core philosophy: trust no one, verify everything. This mindset is implemented through 3 guiding principles: verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach. And these principles should be applied across 6 foundational pillars: identities, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, and networks. Identity and access security is now the centerpiece of modern security, serving as the foundation for models like Zero Trust. First, let's talk about some key concepts of identity and access management, or IAM. The goal of IAM is to control access. Basically, it involves a subject and an object. The subject wants to access the object. And we need to control access to ensure that the right users have the right permissions to access the right resources. There's a general framework for identity and access management called AAA, which stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. Here's what the framework looks like. To access resources, we need identity, something that identifies a subject, for example, username or object ID. Authentication, a process to verify who you are using a password or multi-factor authentication. Authorization, a process to check what resources you can access and what kind of actions you can take. Finally, you can access your resources. In addition, we need an accounting process to track who did what, where, and when. Microsoft Entra is a product family from Microsoft designed to secure identity. Microsoft Entra is a product family from Microsoft. In addition, we need an accounting process to track who did what, where, and when. Microsoft Entra is a product family from Microsoft designed to secure identity and access. Microsoft Entra enables organizations to establish zero trust through robust identity and access management. Secure workforce access using identity governance, identity protection, and a unified access control. Secure customer and partner access with external identities. And secure access across multi-cloud environments. Microsoft Entra includes various products to implement these capabilities, such as Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory. This is a cloud-based identity and access management solution. And Microsoft Entra Identity Governance provides functions such as entitlement management, access reviews, and privileged identity management. Now let's take a quick tour of Microsoft Entra. Here's a Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Under Identity, you can manage users, manage groups, manage devices, and manage applications. Under Protection, you can access identity protection, set up a conditional access, reveal identity secure score, and configure authentication methods. Under Identity Governance, you can perform access reviews, manage privileged identities. Also, you can access the capabilities such as Verified ID, permissions management, and global secure access. Let's look at identity management in Microsoft Entra ID. Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory, is a cloud-based identity and access management service. Here's a diagram from Microsoft that shows the role of Microsoft Entra ID. We can see Microsoft Entra ID acts as a control center. It provides identities for users, devices, and workloads, and it connects services like Azure, Microsoft 365, and numerous apps in the cloud or on-premises. What types of identities can you manage in Microsoft Entra? Basically, there are identities for people and identities for machines. Within human identities, we have identities for internal users who are the employees of your organization, and identities for external users, such as customers, consultants, and suppliers. Within machine identities, we have identities for devices, such as laptops, mobile phones, and IoT devices, and identities for workloads, such as virtual machines, applications, and services. Groups help us manage identities more efficiently. For example, if 20 employees in the marketing department need the same access, instead of assigning permissions one by one, you can create a group and assign the access rights to it. Every group member will then automatically have those permissions. In Microsoft Entra ID, there are two types of groups. Security groups. This is the most common group type. It can have members like users, devices, and service principals. And a Microsoft 365 group. This group type can only have users and members. It provides access to a shared mailbox, calendar, files, and SharePoint sites. Now let's do a quick demo of identity management in Microsoft Entra ID. Here's the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. In the left menu under Identity, I can manage users. Click All Users. It shows a list of users. Click New User. I can create new user or invite external user. Select a user, for example, Henry Twill. I can view the user information. Click Monitoring. It shows the user signing activities. Click Properties. I can edit all kinds of user properties. To manage groups, I can click All Groups. It shows a list of groups. Select a group, for example, Group Marketing. Click Members. It lists the members of this group. To manage devices, I can click All Devices. It shows a list of registered and joined devices. Select a device, for example, VM-Win11. I can view the properties of this device. To manage applications, I can click Enterprise Applications. It shows a list of registered applications in my demo organization. Click New Application. I can search applications using Microsoft Entra App Gallery. To register an application, I can click App Registrations. Click New Registration. I can start the registration process. Although many organizations have moved their workloads to the cloud, a large number of resources still remain on-premises. How can we access all resources regardless of their location? We need to use hybrid identities. Traditionally, organizations manage their identities locally for accessing on-premises resources, such as shared drives, servers, and databases. With the migration to the cloud, organizations create cloud-based identities for accessing cloud services, such as virtual machines, containers, and storage. However, these are two separate identity management systems. How can we integrate on-premises and cloud-based identities to enhance productivity and security? This is where hybrid identities come into play. When using Microsoft Identity Management solutions, companies typically manage on-premises identities with one or more Active Directories, while cloud-based identities are managed with Microsoft Entra ID. To enable hybrid identities, we need to implement provisioning and synchronization between on-premises and cloud-based identity systems. Provisioning means creating identities across different directory systems, and synchronization ensures identity information remains consistent. We can use a Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync to implement hybrid identities. By downloading and installing a lightweight agent in their on-premises environment, organizations can use Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync to manage identity provisioning and synchronization. Now let's quickly look at hybrid management in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Click Microsoft Entra Connect. Here you can learn more about Microsoft Entra Cloud Sync. Click Manage. You can get started with Cloud Sync by downloading and installing the provisioning agent. Microsoft Entra ID offers various authentication methods. Before we get into them, let's revisit the fundamental concept of authentication. What is authentication? Authentication is the process of verifying credentials. When a user signs into a device, application, or service, the verification process uses available methods like password or multi-factor authentication to either prove or reject the user's identity. You can use a variety of authentication methods in Microsoft Entra ID. We can group them into 4 categories. The password has been the standard authentication method for a long time, but today, relying on a password alone is considered bad practice. This is because simple passwords like 123456 or password 1 are very easy for hackers to crack. Additionally, people often reuse the same password for multiple services like banking, social media, or work accounts. If hackers breach one service, they can use the compromised passwords to access many other systems. Since a password by itself is insufficient to protect identities, the industry is moving toward multi-factor authentication. Basically, you need to provide a password plus something else, like something you have or something you are. In the early implementation, the good methods are SMS, like getting a text message on your mobile phone, voice, like receiving a phone call. But now we have some better ways, like Authenticator app to receive a push notification, Oath software tokens that can be installed on your mobile phone, Oath hardware tokens that refresh codes every 30 or 60 seconds. The best solution to password problems is not using password at all. This is called passwordless. We can use the authentication methods like Authenticator app to enable phone sign-in. Windows Hello, the built-in authentication methods on Windows devices using biometrics like a facial detection and fingerprints. FIDO2 security key. It's like a USB key protected by fingerprints or pins. And a certificate-based authentication. So to sum up the evolution of authentication methods, using a password alone is bad. The good or better approach is to use a password plus something else, and the best way is to go passwordless. Now let's look at authentication methods in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. You will see a list of the way is to go passwordless. Now let's look at approach is to use a password plus something else, and the best way is to go passwordless. Now let's look at authentication methods in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. You will see a list of available authentication methods, such as FIDO2 passkey, Microsoft Authenticator, SMS, voice call, and certificate-based authentication. You can configure the policy for an authentication method. For example, click Microsoft Authenticator. You can enable or disable it. Choose the target as either all users or select groups. You can further configure the settings of the Microsoft Authenticator app. Passwords are still the most common form of authentication, so it's important to manage passwords properly. Microsoft Entra ID provides several ways to protect passwords. Its built-in password policy enforces the password requirements, such as the minimum password length, the password complexity by using the mix of uppercase characters, lowercase characters, numbers, and symbols, and the password expiration duration. The password lockout to handle multiple unsuccessful sign-in attempts. The banned password list to block the usage of weak passwords and their variations, such as password 1. Microsoft maintains a global banned password list. Organizations can also set up their custom banned password list. And in a hybrid environment that includes both cloud and on-premises, Microsoft Entra Password Protection can be integrated with an on-premises Active Directory. Microsoft Entra ID also supports a self-service password reset, or SSPR. So users can change their passwords without involving the help desk. You can configure the authentication methods for the self-service password reset. Now let's look at the password protection in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Here I can set up lockout threshold. Lockout threshold, it refers to how many failed sign-ins on an account are allowed before its first lockout. For example, 10 times. Lockout duration, for example, 60 seconds. I can set up and enforce my custom banned password list. For example, I don't want to include my demo company name and some job roles in the passwords. I can enter here. I can also enable password protection for Windows Server Active Directory. Next, let's look at self-service password reset. Click Password Reset. I can enable the self-service password reset for the selected group or all users. Then I will configure the authentication methods for the self-service password reset. I can select if it requires one-step verification or two-step verification. Then choose the authentication methods available to users, for example, email or mobile phone. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is a security feature that requires user to provide extra verification when signing in. What is an authentication factor in MFA? It means a way to verify your identity. There are three common kinds of factors. Something you know, like your password, PIN, or security questions. Something you have, like your mobile phone, email, or hardware tokens. And something you are, your biometrics, like a fingerprints, voice, or face scan. So multi-factor authentication means using two or more different kinds of factors to verify your identity. For example, you can use password plus SMS text message to your phone, password plus push notification to your authenticator app. But using password plus security questions doesn't meet the requirement of MFA because they belong to the same factor type, something you know. To set up MFA in Microsoft Entra ID, you can choose from several verification options, including receiving an SMS text message on your mobile phone, receiving a voice call, using Microsoft Authenticator to receive a push notification or a verification code, and use oath software or hardware tokens to get a verification code. In Microsoft Entra ID, there are two common ways to enforce multi-factor authentication. Security defaults. These are a set of Microsoft recommendations for basic identity security. You can enable security defaults to require all users to register for MFA. Or conditional access. If you have a Microsoft Entra ID Premium license, you can create conditional access policies to meet more complex security requirements. Now let's look at multi-factor authentication in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Here I can configure the settings of multi-factor authentication, such as account lockout, block or unblock users, and fraud alert. In the left menu, I can also click Authentication Methods. Here I can manage the policies of authentication methods used in MFA. To manage security defaults for my organization, in the left menu, under Identity, click Overview, then click Properties. I can manage security defaults. Here I can enable security defaults to require all users to register for MFA. If you have a Microsoft Entra ID Premium license, it's recommended to use a conditional access to enforce MFA. In the left menu under Protection, click Conditional Access. Here you can create a policy that requires multi-factor authentication for a specific scenario. Conditional access in Microsoft Entra ID helps you effectively manage resource access to meet your business and security needs. For example, you can use conditional access in these scenarios. Require MFA for all users. Require password changes for high-risk users. Block access to an app from unsupported device platforms. Microsoft Entra Conditional Access provides three key functions: analyzing signals from various sources, making decisions on resource access, and enforcing organizational policies. Here's a diagram from Microsoft which describes the process of conditional access. First, it collects all kinds of signals, such as identities, risk, devices, applications, location, and network. Then it evaluates access attempts to decide whether to allow, block, restrict access, or require additional actions, such as requiring MFA. Finally, it enforces the access decision to apps and resources. To use conditional access, you need to create policies. In a nutshell, policies are like if-then statements. If a condition is met, then make a decision. A conditional access policy has two parts: assignments and access controls. Within the assignments section, you can specify users, groups, or service principals who are included or excluded from this policy. Target resources this policy applies to, such as applications, services, user actions, and global secure access. Network and location where the user is signing in. And conditions that define when this policy will apply. As you can see, the assignment section defines who the policy affects, what resources it applies to, where access happens, and when it should be enforced. Within the access controls section, you can define how the policy is enforced, including blocking access to target resources, granting access with options to apply one or more controls, for example, requiring multi-factor authentication, and enabling session control for a limited experience with a cloud app, like asking a user to sign in again after an hour of login. Now let's look at conditional access in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Click limited experience with a cloud app, like asking a user to sign in again after an hour of login. Now let's look at conditional access in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Click Policies. Let's select a policy. For example, require MFA to access Azure DevOps. Under Assignments, for users, this policy includes all users. For target resources, it selects the app Azure DevOps. For network, this policy includes any network or location. Under conditions, it checks the signals of user risk. When the user risk level is high or medium, the policy will be enforced. Under access controls, this policy grants access but requires multi-factor authentication. For session control, it asks a user to sign in again after being logged in for over an hour. Microsoft Azure uses roles and role-based access control, RBAC, to manage resource access. Before we look at them, let's revisit the concept of authorization. What is authorization? There are users and resources. The users want to access the resources. Authorization is the process of access control. There are different ways to implement access control. A popular method is role-based access control, or RBAC. To do that, you first need to define a role. A role is a collection of permissions. For example, in Microsoft Azure, the Global Administrator role can manage all aspects of Microsoft Azure ID and the Microsoft services that use Microsoft Azure ID. The Global Reader role can read everything that a Global Administrator can, but can't make any changes. Based on the role assignments, the access control will grant or deny the requested actions on the resources. Now let's look at Microsoft Azure role-based access control. It has 4 components: security principal, role, scope, and role assignment. A security principal can be a user, group, or service principal. A role represents a set of permissions, such as user admin, application developer, or security admin. A scope defines affected resources, such as directory, devices, or applications. And a role assignment brings everything together. It assigns the role to the security principal for accessing the specified scope of resources. Microsoft Azure has 2 types of roles for accessing the specified scope of resources. Microsoft Azure has 2 types of roles: building roles that has a fixed set of permissions, such as Global Administrator, User Administrator, and Billing Administrator. You can also create custom roles by selecting permissions according to your specific needs. Microsoft Azure roles can manage access to various Microsoft permissions according to your specific needs. Microsoft Azure roles can manage access to various. You can also create custom roles by selecting permissions according to your specific needs. Microsoft Azure roles can manage access to various Microsoft 365 services, such as Microsoft Azure ID, Microsoft Defender, Exchange, Intune, and Teams. We can categorize Microsoft Azure roles based on the services they cover. Microsoft Azure specific roles. These include roles like user admin, groups admin, or application admin, which are managing Microsoft Azure resources only. Service-specific roles. These include roles like Exchange admin, Intune admin, or Teams admin, which are focused on managing specific Microsoft 365 services. And cross-service roles. These include roles like Global admin, Security admin, or Compliance admin, which have permissions across multiple services. While the concept of role-based access control is the same, there are different implementations of RBACs. For example, Microsoft Azure RBAC that we discussed controls access to Microsoft Azure resources. Azure RBAC manages access to resources on the Microsoft Azure cloud, such as virtual machines, databases, or storage. Now let's look at roles in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. There are many built-in roles like application administrator, application developer, billing administrator, and more. Select a role, for example, application developer. You can view the current role assignments and check the role description to see the summary and the role permissions. You can also create a new custom role. Enter a role name and add permissions for this custom role. Microsoft Entra Identity Governance helps organizations ensure the right people have the right access to the right resources at the right time. Identity governance is important to organizations because it addresses some key governance questions. For example, who can access which resources? What are users doing with their access? Are our access controls effective? And can auditors verify these controls? By leveraging identity governance, organizations can effectively govern 3 critical workflows, including identity lifecycle, access lifecycle, and privileged access lifecycle. The identity lifecycle refers to the process of managing a user's identity. It typically follows a human resources workflow. It starts with a no-access status. When a new employee joins the company, an identity is created. As the employee moves to new roles, the identity and associated privileges are updated. When the employee leaves the company, the identity is deactivated or removed, returning to the no-access status. Access lifecycle refers to the process of managing access permissions to resources. It starts with a no-access status. When needed, a user is assigned a certain level of access rights to specific resources. As the user's role changes, the access permissions to the scope of resources are updated accordingly. The existing accesses need to be reviewed periodically to ensure they are still correct and necessary. When access is no longer needed, it's removed. Privileged roles like a global admin, user admin, and application admin are removed. Privileged roles like a global admin, user admin, and application admin have higher access permission to critical resources. So it's important to secure the privileged access lifecycle. It starts with a no privileged role status. When needed, an eligible user is assigned the first privileged role. As the job responsibilities change, privileged roles are updated accordingly. When the user leaves, the associated privileged roles are deactivated or removed. Turning to no privileged role status. Now let's look at identity governance in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Microsoft Entra Identity Governance helps organizations improve productivity while meeting security, governance, and compliance requirements. It provides capabilities including entitlement management for managing the identity and the resource access lifecycle at scale. Access reviews to ensure users or guests have proper access and still need it. Privileged identity management to reduce the risk of privileged access to critical resources. and the lifecycle workflows to automate the employee join, move, and leave process. Microsoft Entra Access Reviews help organizations ensure that only the right people maintain access to important resources, reducing security risks by regularly checking permissions as users change roles or responsibilities. We can use access reviews in many use cases. For example, checking if too many people hold privileged roles, protecting critical assets like applications and data by validating access needs, reviewing policy exceptions to meet auditing requirements, confirming guest access to business content, and setting up recurring access reviews at specified frequencies such as monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Here's a general workflow for Microsoft Entra Access Reviews. First, admins create a program. Within a program, they create one or more access reviews for teams, groups, or applications. Next, reviewers need to perform access reviews within the review period. Finally, based on the review settings and the results, access will be kept or removed. We can also create multi-stage access reviews to meet more complex business and compliance requirements. It enables various types of reviewers to participate in the workflow at different stages. Now let's look at access reviews in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Access reviews are part of the identity governance functions. On the Overview page, you can see a dashboard showing the overall access review status. Click Access Reviews, then click New Access Review. We can select what to review. For example, select an application, for example, Slack. Then select the scope as all users. We can choose if it's a multi-stage review. Select reviewers. For example, users review their own access. Specify recurrence of review. For example, duration is 3 days. Review recurrence is quarterly. Select start date and when the review will end. We can set up the actions upon review completion. For example, what will happen if reviewers don't respond? Finally, we can give a review name and create it. After the access review is active, the reviewers will receive an email notification asking them to complete it within the review period. Admins can select an access review to view details and check its current status. Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, helps organizations reduce the risk of excessive or misused access to critical resources. Privileged roles like admin and owner have high-level access permissions to important resources in your organization. If these accounts are compromised or misused, it can cause significant damage to your business. So how do we manage the risk of too much or unnecessary access? That's where privileged identity management comes into play. Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management can manage roles in Microsoft Entra like a global administrator, user administrator, or billing administrator. Roles in Azure like owner, contributor, and a user access administrator. And also make groups eligible for role assignments. Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management, or PIM, offers some key capabilities, such as just-in-time or JIT access. It means users get temporary access permissions only when they need to do some privileged operations like changing account information. Approval and justification can be required for activating privileged roles. Time-bound. It means users can only use a privileged role within a defined time window. Visibility. It refers to notifying relevant parties when a privileged role is activated. An audit is available for track access history. The general workflow of privileged identity management starts with admins assign eligible roles to users for resource access. Users activate eligible roles before performing privileged tasks. Reviewers approve or deny role activation requests. Before the role assignment expires, the user can request to extend it. If it has already expired, the user can request to renew it. And the history of privileged role assignments and activations is audited. Now let's look at privileged identity management in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. I can assign eligibility for Microsoft Entra roles. Click Add Assignments. Select a role. For example, Application Developer. Select a member. Then I can assign this privileged role to this member. I can activate my privileged role when I need it. This is known as just-in-time access. Click Activate your role. For my role, Application Administrator, I can click Activate. Enter duration, for example, 8 hours. Provide the activation reason. For example, for demo, then click Activate. Admins can approve activation requests. And we can audit the history of assignments and activations. Identity plays a critical role in today's digital world. Microsoft Entra Identity Protection enables organizations to effectively manage identity-based risks. There are some common types of identity-based risks. User risk is related to user accounts. For example, leaked credentials like usernames and passwords posted on the dark web. Signing risk is related to authentication requests. For example, someone tried to log in from an unfamiliar location or from a malware-linked IP address. And workload identity risk is related to applications. Applications are often given identities to access resources they need. If an application's identity gets compromised, it can lead to serious security breaches. Microsoft Entra Identity Protection provides several key capabilities, including detect risks. Microsoft leverages its big data and threat intelligence to detect identity-based risks. Investigate risks by providing reports for detected risky users, risky signings, and risky workload identities. Remediate risks based on risk levels. For example, creating a risk-based conditional access policy to require MFA when detecting high or medium user risk. And export data from identity protection to other systems, such as a security information and event management SIEM solution like Microsoft Sentinel. Now let's look at identity protection in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. The dashboard provides information such as number of attacks blocked by identity protection, number of users protected, number of high-risk users, and more. You can view risk reports for risky users, risky workload identities, risky sign-ins, and risk detection results. Under Protect, you can create conditional access policies based on the detected risks. Click New Policy. Click Conditions. You can set up conditions based on user risk level and sign-in risk level. Microsoft Entra Permissions Management helps organizations centrally control permissions for all identities across a multi-cloud environment. Many companies run their workloads and services in multiple clouds, such as Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. However, working with different cloud platforms simultaneously significantly increases the complexity. It becomes challenging to ensure consistent controls across multiple environments to meet the security, governance, and compliance requirements. One of the biggest challenges is managing the permissions of users and workload identities across a multi-cloud environment. How can we gain visibility, maintain control, and improve productivity while working with different cloud solutions? This is why we need Microsoft Entra Permissions Management. It provides a single unified platform to manage permissions across major cloud providers. With permissions management, you can discover permission risks, get complete visibility into identities, permissions granted, and permissions used through tools like a dashboard and the Permission Creep Index. Remediate permission risks. Quickly right-size excessive and unused permissions, and you can also set up automatic remediation. Monitor permission risks. You can receive alerts for suspicious activities and access detailed reports. If you recall the Zero Trust security model we discussed earlier, Microsoft Entra Permissions Management empowers one of its guiding principles: use least privilege access. Now let's look at permissions management in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Click Launch Portal. Click Settings. Here you can configure the connections to multiple cloud platforms, including AWS, Azure, and GCP. On the dashboard page, it shows the Permission Creep Index, or PCI. It measures the gap between permissions granted and permissions actually used. A higher index indicates more unused or excessive permissions. On the Analytics page, you can find detailed information about users, groups, tasks, and accessible resources in each cloud platform. On the Remediation page, you can take action on identity permissions. On the Autopilot page, you can create automation rules. On the Reports page, you can access detailed reports. Microsoft Entra Global Secure Access helps organizations manage controlled access to software-as-service SaaS applications and private corporate resources. From a security point of view, it delivers the key capabilities of a Security Service Edge solution. What is Security Service Edge, or SSE? It's a cloud-based service that ensures safe access to the Internet, cloud services, and private resources from anywhere. Security Service Edge includes several key services: Cloud Access Security Broker, CASB or CASB, for securing cloud applications and data; Secure Web Gateway, SWG, for filtering Internet traffic, blocking harmful websites, and enforcing corporate policies; and Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA, for allowing remote users to access internal resources based on zero-trust principles. When mapping these SSE services to Microsoft products, the matching solutions are Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, Microsoft Entra Internet Access, and Microsoft Entra Private Access. Also, Microsoft Entra Global Secure Access is the unifying term that includes both Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Private Access. Here's a diagram from Microsoft which provides an overview of Microsoft Entra Global Secure Access. We can see Global Secure Access unifies Microsoft Entra Internet Access and Private Access. It's built on zero-trust principles. It works with identities, endpoints, and remote networks to route network traffic and provide secure access to various environments, such as Microsoft 365, Internet, and private places. You can replace traditional VPNs with Microsoft Entra Private Access to securely connect to your corporate network from anywhere. To access private resources, you will create a special enterprise application. It works like a container for your resources. You can decide which resources to add to the container. The application has a network connector, acting as a bridge between private access service and the resources. There are two ways to set up private access: quick access and per app access. For quick access, you create one quick access app and add resources to it. All resources share the same access policies applied to this app. You can use a fully qualified domain name, FQDN, IP addresses, IP ranges, and ports to define your private resources. This information is called quick access app segments. If you need more granular controls, for example, having different access policies for different private resources, you will use per app access. You can create multiple global secure access apps instead of a single quick access app. Then add your private resources to different apps based on their access requirements. Correspondingly, each app has its own app segments, which is why this method is called per app access. Microsoft Entra Global Secure Access also provides a dashboard with various widgets such as Global Secure Access Snapshot to summarize users, devices, and destinations with captured network traffic. Alerts and notifications to monitor suspicious activities. Usage profiling to display usage patterns for network traffic. Cross-tenant access to show the number of users and devices accessing other tenants. Web category filters to highlight top categories of web content that are blocked or allowed. And device status to show the active and inactive devices. Now let's look at Global Secure Access in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. On the dashboard page, you will find various widgets, for example, Global Secure Access Snapshot, alerts and notifications, usage profiling, and many others. To get started, you need to enable traffic forwarding profiles. Under Connect, click Traffic Forwarding. You can configure profiles for Microsoft Traffic, Private Access, and Internet Access. You can link conditional access policies to the profile and assign users and groups. Users can download the Global Secure Access client to their devices. The client will tunnel traffic from the device to the Global Secure Access service.